In sprinting analysis, it's easy to get drawn into the narrative of labeling sprinters as strong or poor starters and strong or poor finishers. What this narrative often overlooks is that for some athletes known as poor starters but strong finishers, getting a faster start wouldn't actually be guaranteed to improve their finishing time. In oversimplified terms, for some athletes, their lack of exertion or explosiveness at the start of the race actually allows them to conserve energy that's used in the later part of the race after they've built momentum. There are of course exceptions, since athletes who don't achieve the most efficient angles when exiting the blocks and getting upright still have room to improve their first 30-meter split while keeping their 30 to 100 meter time the same. But with some athletes who have no glaring technical flaws in their start, trying to get to the 30-meter mark faster than their natural race pattern permits them to can throw off this race pattern and leave them struggling to hit their top gear. There are some sprinters who can have good starts from a technical standpoint, but their performance from a rolling start in relays tends to exceed their performance from a block start in the 100 meters relative to other athletes. One athlete that this applies to is Andre de Grasse. While de Grasse holds a PB of 9.89 in the 100 meters, there's nothing obvious about his start that you could point to as holding him back, and he's an athlete who runs with finesse, meaning even if he tried to push himself harder at the start of the race, it's unlikely to improve his finishing time, as it would throw off his race pattern. While de Grasse ranks as joint 44th all time with his personal best in the 100 meters, when it comes to running anchor legs in the 4x1 relay, there's very few athletes past or present that you will bet on beating him to the finish line if they received the baton at the exact same mark. Looking back on de Grasse's anchor leg performances, in the 2021 Birmingham Diamond League he closed a massive deficit after receiving the baton way behind Mitchell Blake, and he finished just 0.02 of a second behind. Just a couple of months later in the Olympic final, he made up significant ground to secure the bronze medal by passing both Oblique Seville and Wu Xing Chan, who received the baton in front of him. Another athlete who shows a similar propensity to perform beyond his expected capabilities in the 4x1 relay is Filippo Tortu. Tortu was also running on the anchor leg in the 2021 Olympic final, and he had a historic performance by chasing down Mitchell Blake to take first position right before the line and secure the gold medal for Italy. Tortu is one of the most consistent technique runners in the 100 meters, as his form hardly strays from its default model when he's running. As for his block start, it appears to be close to optimal in terms of his own mechanics, yet he seems to perform much better in rolling start situations. The difference between Tortu and other athletes with exceptional relay prowess is that he isn't an exceptional finisher in the 100 meters and runs a more balanced race than some of the other athletes I'll be highlighting. Some more athletes who are also better from rolling starts than block starts are Carl Lewis and Noah Lyles. In terms of 100 meter execution, Lyles and Lewis share similarities as they are known as weak starters but strong finishers, and unlike the previous athletes I've mentioned, Lyles and Lewis had room for improvement when it came to their start in the 100 meters. For Lewis, his angles coming out of the blocks were suboptimal, but for Lyles, his angles weren't particularly bad by elite standards, but his deficiency was more associated with his step length and force application in the early steps, allowing his first few steps to be longer and less rushed, thus producing more force, was something that Lyles focused on, and as his start began to improve, it had a notable impact on his performance as he finally lowered his PB from 9.86 set in 2019 to 9.83 in 2023. This is a prime example of an athlete who had room to improve on his start without causing any major alterations to his race pattern or style of race execution, as he maintained his typical position as the strongest finisher in the field, clocking a final 40 meters of 3.38 in the 2023 World Champs final. Even with his improvement to his start, he still falls into the same category as de Grasse, as an athlete whose ability on the relay from a rolling start is more rare than his ability in the 100 meters. We can call this archetype of sprinters momentum sprinters, and it can apply to both athletes who have rolling start ability that exceeds their standard 100 meter ability, as well as athletes who have disproportionately strong finishes in the 100 meters relative to their starts. Some athletes meeting the latter description who haven't been particularly prominent in relays or haven't ran many anchor legs are Chirandi Martina, Reese Prescott and Wallace Spearman. Another athlete who outperforms in relay races compared to the 100 metres is Terence Laird, who has a 100 metre PB of 10.05, but when he has come up against other athletes with similar 100 metre ability on the relay, he has flown by them with ease. You could make the case that Joseph Fahnbulleh is also a momentum sprinter, and while he does meet the criteria of having a poor start relative to his finish and performs well on relay anchor legs, he doesn't have the same style of sprinting or body type as the other sprinters we've mentioned, since they are generally light framed and run with finesse. Fahnbulleh, on the other hand, is a power sprinter who's heavily built but lacks initial explosiveness, so I believe he belongs in a category among other sprinters who don't quite fit the status quo. Some of these sprinters include Jimmy Vico, Walter Dix and Ferdinand Omanyala. While being powerfully built sprinters, they don't have particularly good starts, or that initial explosiveness we've come to associate with many muscular athletes, and the archetype name we can give to these athletes are power finishers. Some athletes who have had both world-class starts and finishes to their races during their career include Usain Bolt, Johan Blake, Asafa Powell, Nesta Carter, Maurice Greene, Justin Gatlin, Fred Curley and Trayvon Bromell, with all of these athletes recording a first 30 metre split below 3.80 and a final 40 metre split below 3.40. We can call this archetype dual dominant sprinters. From the data available, only 2 athletes have managed both of these feats in the same race, with those athletes being Johan Blake and Usain Bolt, with Blake hitting both milestones in his 9.69 run, while Bolt achieved it in 3 separate races. Of the athletes I've listed, Asafa Powell and Justin Gatlin regularly had world-class starts, but they only had one finish in their career below 3.4, while on the opposite end of the spectrum, Fred Curley has had more strong finishes to his races, with only one start below 3.8. This shows that athletes of this category can lean heavily towards dominance in one segment of their race, but they have still proven they could be dominant in the other segment at least once as well. The 8 sprinters in this category have all ran under 9.8 seconds, and the only other athletes to run below 9.8 who haven't hit the requirements for this category are Tyson Gay, Christian Coleman and Ferdinand Omanyala, with Omanyala already being categorised as a power finisher. This leads me on to the question about what category Tyson Gay belongs to, and while he was no doubt a powerful sprinter with an amazing finish relative to his start, he didn't have the same stocky frame as the other athletes I've labelled as power finishers. When comparing Tyson to momentum sprinters I've mentioned earlier in the video, Tyson was much more explosive at the earlier stages of the race and recorded some of the fastest splits between 30 to 60 metres ever. While he was a talented relay runner, he didn't show a particular advantage from rolling starts compared to normal 100 metre races, although his placement on third legs rather than anchor legs may have prevented us from seeing his full relay potential. If Tyson had been able to achieve better angles while exiting the blocks in the 100 metres, I think that he may have had the potential to record faster 30 metre splits without it affecting his 30 to 100 metre time, thus improving his finishing time overall. With all things considered, I don't think Tyson quite fits any of the archetypes I've outlined because of his unique attributes, but if he had improved his body position when exiting the blocks, he may have been a dual dominant sprinter like Blake, Bolt and others. The final archetype of athlete that I'll highlight in this video are the athletes that are block explosiveness dominant, meaning that they have the biggest advantage against their opponents in the early part of the race when coming out of the blocks. How I would define these athletes is that they're the ones who you will put on the first leg of a relay and not feel like you are wasting their talents by not putting them on another leg. For example, Justin Gatlin, Asafa Powell and Maurice Greene were all terrific starters, but putting them on a starting leg feels like a waste of their all-round sprinting talents when you could place them on the second leg or anchor. The sprinters that are most fitting for this archetype are Christian Coleman, Subing Chan, Ronnie Baker, John Drummond and Kim Collins, just to name a few, and these athletes tend to be average height or below, which is the stereotype for start dominant sprinters who also excel in the 60 metre event. Given the genetic component to these sprinter types, they can also be applied to amateur athletes, so if you would like to find out which sprinter's archetype you might belong to, you can fill out the questionnaire that will be linked in the description of this video to receive a free archetype specific training emphasis plan. Now I'd like to hear from you in the comments. Are there some athletes that you think I missed when discussing these archetypes? I hope you enjoyed this video and thanks for watching.